beats, baby.
Welcome to Universal Theory, where the goal is to find a common language between the abstract and concrete. We are the unorthodox representation of physics and metaphysics. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Trent.
And together, we are Universal Theory.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Universal Theory. I'm your co-host, Trent, joined as always, Jordan. How's it going, man?
You see it.
Yeah. Oh, he talks.
Oh, yeah. He does a little bit.
Okay.
You see it?
I see it. Oh, yeah. Yup. Now you're miming correctly.
Oh, yeah.
Because we are talking about the logo today.
Last time
you was in a box. You was in that gender box.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're here clowning. It's a vibe. I love our new spot.
Mm-hmm.
It's not our new spot, but
Yeah.
it's crazy what some aesthetic changes will do.
Yes.
Makes it look and feel a lot more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I like our new splash screen. And as you can see today, we're going over the principles. So we got them all listed there.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the little video that I made over there in the corner. So yeah, before we get started though, this is something that we're going to continue to talk about. Obviously, we appreciate everybody that's down in the comments, that's liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and sharing our content. I can't express enough how much we appreciate that, and just seeing that activity and just seeing the comments and seeing the likes and when people say they share it, it gives me that much more drive. It makes me want to do it that much more because I know that I'm reaching that many more people, and it's not just me. Sure, me and Jordan are creating the content, but what you guys are doing is just as important, and it's getting the word out. So we really, really appreciate everybody who's down there. Also, we've had a few people already go to our Universal Threads shop. Right now, we've got the Initiate Edition line up. As you can see, yeah, that's what Jordan and I are wearing. It's got the Initiate Edition across the bottom. We've got about 40 more pieces that we're going to do under this Initiate Edition line. So if you haven't gotten in there, get in there and get you something. It's super high quality. When we got our samples, I was very happy with the samples, like the thickness of the shirt and wifey's. She got the female crop top, and it's extremely soft. Just as a warning, though, they might shrink a little bit if you get the crop top. I haven't heard of anything else shrinking, but that crop top might shrink just a little bit. So maybe just get one that's a little bit larger for you. If you're thinking about getting a small, maybe get a medium. If you're thinking about getting a medium, maybe get a large, just so that way you're not disappointed. Or don't wash it in warm water. If you wash it in cold water, you'd probably be fine. These are little things you pick up on when you become an adult. But yeah, our merch is dope. Check it out. Our Patreon is up. I know that we're getting ahead right now, so we're going to start focusing more on Patreon and experimental creative clips. So go check out our Patreon, hit us up, let us know what you're thinking. Patreon's going to be a good place for us to hang out, for us to have conversations. The comments is a good place, but Patreon's really going to be home. Mm-hmm. Like, that's how I see it in the next 60 to 90 days is really being where we get in with the community. So if that's something that you're interested in, we have a very cheap tier. So you could just get in at the ground level, see if you like it or not, and get a bunch of exclusive content. So we look forward to sharing that with you. We also have, I'm not going to say who, but we're lining up a few interviews, so that's exciting. Mm-hmm. And we really think that's going to give a good boost to our show. It's going to add some color, having some other voices in here other than listen to me and Jordan talk the whole time. So, yeah. That covers about all the housekeeping notes. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that I missed?
Nope.
Okay, cool. So on to all the principles, and we're going to use our logo as the frame of reference. And funny story, actually really cool story, this wasn't our idea. My wife was watching, I think, Vibration or Polarity. It was one of the early middle ones. And she was like, is your logo doing so-and-so because of this principle? And is this there because of this principle? And that was really like, well, yeah. I mean, we didn't have the artist do it for that reason, but the principles are one of those things where as soon as you have something, they're there. So Jordan and I were already talking about doing all the principles at once, and we thought that would be a good idea to use that logo because it was already seen by someone who was watching our content. They noticed the principles in our logo. So we're going to do this episode a certain way today. We are going to fold the principles on each other: mentalism with gender, correspondence with cause and effect, vibration with rhythm, and then polarity to end it. And as you can see in the Kybalion, actually, mental gender is the chapter after gender. So they're already kind of showing you and hinting at that this is a thing. Start putting these principles together. So we're going to expound upon that a little bit. And we are going to also, because we covered circle and the dot, we are going to talk about the circle and the dot. But before we get into any of those, we kind of want to talk about why the principles are so important.
Yes. So, like he was saying, we have mental gender, and that kind of alludes to the fact that you can put these principles together. You can pair them together, which is essentially what they did. They didn't do all of the chapters like that,
right?
Though they could have. But like he said, they're just they did that because they're alluding to the possibilities. And that text is elementary for those that are practicing it or studying it.
Sure. Yeah.
It was an elementary treatise on the subject. So we're just elaborating. And the reason why it's so important is because we talk about the interface and we talk about the biological mechanism and the limitations that it has because of the sensory mechanisms and how we perceive reality. And we're not actually seeing reality, but it's a perception. And then that perception is relative to the sum total of events of the evolution of the organism. And then that's relative to what planet it's on or what organism it is on a specific planet or a solar system and so on. So there's always going to be this limitation of perception in these vehicles, and that would lead you to question, well, is there anything in reality that's real? And if it is, can we actually perceive it? And the answer is, it's a dualistic answer. It's yes and no. Yes, we can perceive it, but it's merely a perception. So no, we don't actually see what it is, but there is a way of gauging it.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to do with the principles, is we want to find something that applies to everything in existence as far as we can see and experience. And we advise you to go out, take the principles and go out and apply them to everything and see if you can't find them in something.
Yeah, and not just that. So what we use the principles with the scientific method. It ties in, right? So if when you see people that are using the principles, they will leave falsifiability and the kind of the scientific method out of it. And we highly recommend that you don't do that. We highly recommend that those two things coming together is the yin and the yang. It's kind of the principle of academia is the scientific method.
Yes.
So just as a warning or a take heed, advice, whatever you want to call it, intertwining those two things, your principles and your scientific method, are going to give you the best results. You might flounder a little bit with one or the other, just like we've talked about in all of our episodes so far. It's kind of that holistic viewpoint. So when you start to use the principles, if you already are, hopefully you are, and if you don't know what the scientific method is, it's really just being able to reproduce it. And it's trying to prove yourself wrong. So when you see something, can you, and obviously, right, if you're looking at a phone and you're saying, oh, well, how do I apply the principles to that? You can't, reproduce that. So in that sense, then you would try to falsify your claim, try to say, well, maybe that isn't gender because of X, Y, and Z. And then you kind of have this internal monologue. But that keeps you from going down a biased path.
Yes.
So just wanted to get that out there to you. That's why these are so important, and then to tie in that scientific method. And so including these principles, right? Circle and the dot. So we want to talk about the circle and the dot. Now back to kind of the main part of the podcast. And the circle and the dot isn't something that's going to necessarily show up. It will symbolically, and it will using abstract thought, but our symbol just happened to be circular, so you can see the circle. And then right between our eyes, where like the beams meet, they're white, but then there's a little dot right perfectly in the middle of where those beams meet, and that's the dot. So shout out to King Saul for making that decision. He included that symbolism in our logo really without us asking. So we appreciate that. And now we can go on to mentalism and gender.
Yeah. So we have the all is mind, the universe is mental. And the symbol obviously is a representation of all the contents of the mind and the container that the mind is for the contents. So that's why we have the serpent, and the serpent represents the mind. And it represents the primordial mind, and then within that, it's encompassing all of existence. It's encompassing the entire universe, the multiverse, and so on. And you see the stars in the background, and then you see all the fabric and the particles of existence, and then you see the two halves. That's the gender. So you have the mental, the all is mind, the universe is mental, and then you have the mental gender, because within it you have the polarity of masculine and feminine, and you have the right hemisphere, you have the left hemisphere, and you have the non-linear, the linear, the abstract, the concrete, and so on. So all of these different ways of describing it, our symbol encompasses that through mental gender. So you see the mind engaging itself through gender, through us interacting with this beam, like he said, and then it concentrates the essence of the two, and it creates this singularity, which is the dot, and that's the child. So it's giving birth to the essence of the symbol.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we can also, so for me to add on to this, I really like how it shows Jordan on the left when you're looking at it, and me on the right. But mirroring that, right, is kind of the left brain and the right brain. And it even has the kind of corpus callosum in there. So for mentalism, I really like that imagery, how it almost looks like two halves of a brain. And then for gender, it's the similar thing, right? Because these two tie together closely. So for how gender represents itself in there as well is, we have our eyes, which are, we're looking at each other with that beam, which is actively looking at each other, but then we're receiving it at the same time. So it's like a continuum, and we're receiving that information into our brain, and we are represented as brain. So there's just some cool kind of deeper imagery in there.
And the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
Before we,
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
We're getting wrapped up in it. So before we forget, it's like the yin and the yang is also what it represents, that right and that left hemisphere, and that communication and that oneness of the two, because it's not like your brain is not a singular thing.
Right.
It may have two hemispheres, but we talked about this, briefly, slicing in half the corpus callosum and how that impacts the personality or the individual.
Yeah, and that's it's like a membrane that holds the two halves together. That's what the corpus callosum is. And if you cut that, it causes some interesting things, some side effects. But obviously, the yin and yang symbol is represented in there as well. And moving on to the next two principles, we have correspondence and cause and effect. As above, so below, cause and effect. That one kind of describes itself, doesn't it? I'm sure there's a little blurb about it. But so As above, so below. And we can see the snake eating itself around the outside. That corresponds to conservation of energy. That corresponds to this idea of this energy that we have doesn't get created nor destroyed. It just gets transferred. So it's getting transferred from the tail of the snake to actively feeding the snake. So there's no outside influence, and it's a closing our symbol and enclosing it into a circle, meaning that it's cut off. And in physics, when you are looking at a system, it's from a relative point of view, and it has to be a closed system to understand where the energy is being transferred to. And then for cause and effect, we have, again, how Jordan and I are looking at each other, which is causing these different sides of the brain, right? We're looking at each other, which is the cause, and then we're both being affected by that. And the fact that we're looking at each other being so powerful, it's creating lightning. Yeah. Our laser beams coming out of our eye are creating lightning. No, but this idea, the underlying message of our symbol is this brain, right? That was a part of the direction for King Saul. So a lot of the symbolism in this has to do with the brain, and Jordan being the right and me being the left, and then having the corpus callosum going down the middle, and how that brain and the yin and the yang correspond to each other. So there's going to be a lot of symbolism with brain in this logo.
Yeah, and we see that because the mind exists with these two polarities of masculine and feminine gender, we have a correspondence between the two, because it's the art of balance, and they're corresponding, they're engaging each other because they are a single thing, just like protons and neutrons, or we talked about electrons and positrons.
Yep.
So,
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But you see this interaction between the two, they're corresponding, and then that creates a causal relationship. And then, like you said, it's a boxed in system, because the snake is encompassing the entirety of existence, and it's swallowing its own tail, so it's being conserved within a circuit, and it's cause and effect. We talked about how cause and effect is a box, basically. Like, you can't escape from it.
Yeah.
So once again, and that corresponds. Yeah. Because it corresponds to you not being able to leave it.
Yeah, everything that's in it is in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it remains there eternally, and that is the eternal spirit of creation, the primordial spirit of creation, the serpent. And then they use that once again, because we talked about how the serpent, it sheds its skin, and it's constantly renewing itself, and it's constantly evolving, yet it's still the same creature. So this creature's constantly perpetuating a new cycle and always leaving the old behind and renewing it once again. So yeah, correspondence and cause and effect. And now we're also implementing the other principles, because like we said, the all is mind, the universe is mental, and that mental gender mind is corresponding and creating causes and effects within itself. And we move forward and we use vibration and rhythm. We pair those with those principles. So now we have the mental gender corresponding within itself, creating a causal relationship with itself, and that causation is vibratory. So now we have the vibration of the image. We have the lightning and the stars and all the different particles that it's comprised of, which you're going to elaborate on. But so it's vibratory. It's a vibratory causal agent, and then it's rhythmic. So now there's a rhythm between the two images. There's a rhythm of life. There's the rhythm of the snake. There's the rhythm of everything, the contents within this mind. So now we're advancing upon the principles just to describe the image.
Yep. Yeah, and for vibration, this is what my wife noticed, was that the edge of our symbol, it's not, there's the snake, but then there's the lightning that wraps around it. And so it kind of looks almost like the image is in a vibrating state, which was a great observation. And for rhythm, the measure of the swing to the left is the measure of the swing to the right. Well, we see the stars in the background, and obviously stars have their own rhythm. They go through their own life cycles. But even more face value than that, the light that they give off moves in a rhythm through the electromagnetic spectrum. So the energy is in the electric field, and then it moves to the magnetic field. And these two things is where the energy exists between those fields, and it just moves. It kind of waves back and forth between those two. Mm-hmm. And then obviously just to touch on vibration for one more little thing, but still keeping with that lightning, the way that it looks aesthetically, right? When lightning strikes, it's not smooth. It is a very jagged looking. It almost looks like it's coming down because it's following the path that has the least resistance, and that's why it looks that way. It's not the shortest path; it's the path of least resistance. And there's multiple things that can cause that, but one of the things that can cause that is just where the electrons are. Where the electrons are in the cloud and where the electrons are in the ground, and those electrons are vibrating and they're moving with such energy, they come together. They come together along that shortest path. So just getting into a little bit of that kind of science behind our symbol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then to top it all off, we have polarity. And not to steal your thunder, but one of us has to make this point. The polarity is what we've been talking about the whole time. You have 3 principles on the left-hand side, or above polarity in our image, and 3 principles below polarity, but they all exist on the same thing. They are all principles, and as we talked about, it has to be a spectrum. You have to be able to get from one side to the other to know that you're on that same pole. And that's what all the principles do. And that's why they fold on each other. That's why polarity is that center principle, because the people who wrote this were much smarter than us. And at that time, it was part of kind of the culture when you wrote these kind of books to have meta. There was a meta-ness to it where things were set up a certain way to portray certain things, just like we talked about with mental gender coming after gender. This is one of those similar things where polarity happens to coincide directly in the middle of all the principles.
Yes, it's the crux. And it's funny that it's not just it's the crux, but it's in the middle, and it's polarity.
Right.
So it has these two sides, like a scale. Mm-hmm. It has these two sides, and it's balancing the principles, and it's weighing them together. Mm-hmm. So you put gender on one side, and you have mentalism on the other. You see, and then you have correspondence and cause and effect, and then vibration, and then you have rhythm. And the whole time, we're discussing polarity. Mm-hmm. And then, to go even deeper, the whole time we're also discussing all the principles.
Sure. Yep.
So good it's point. Like, depending upon the angle by which you analyze it, you're going to be discussing other principles, but certain ones will stand out. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if someone was paying attention, they're probably, if they're being astute with their observation, they're listening, and they're like, wait a minute, they're talking about polarity the whole time.
Yeah. Very, very much so. It's one of those things that if you thought of that, let us know in the comment section down below, or if it crossed your mind, or if there are other things that we didn't mention about our image that you think is beneficial to everyone to think about these principles. And actually, for some of the people who are active down there, like Jerome Duffy, like Vitali, like I'm trying to think of like Ashley, my buddy Sean, if you want that you got all 7 principles, let us know what you see for all of them, not just what we missed, but how you would relay those 7 principles. Just a little challenge. I'd like to see where your heads are at. So, because like we said, we want this to be a community. I'm very curious what some of you out there are going to come up with based on our conversations. And yeah, it's great how they all tie together. And it's not like like Jordan was saying, you could compare, mentalism and cause and effect, or you could go with correspondence and gender, and you should.
Yes.
It's not like, no, you should. You should very much learn how they all kind of interpenetrate each other. Because like Jordan was saying, we're talking about all principles when we talk about one principle, or when we discuss any topic. We're talking about all of the principles.
Yes. And that was one of the most revealing things, the conclusion that I came to. One of the most enlightening things was all of them are the same principle. So it's just different facets of one principle. And you could say that this principle is mentalism. You could say, okay, the all is mind, the universe is mental, and then there's mental gender, and there's mental gender correspondence, cause and effect, mental gender correspondence, cause and effect, vibration, mental gender correspondence, cause and effect, vibration, rhythm, and then you have polarity, which brings it all together. Or you could play around with it and mix and match, and you could say all is polarity.
Right. You could have some fun times. Well, listen to me. It's fun to me. It might not be as fun to you. But you could definitely have some interesting conversations doing that. Find somebody that you can converse with openly, that you feel comfortable with, and try to do that. Or maybe look at some of the principles and maybe try to switch some of the verbiage and see if it all still makes sense. I don't know. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something that's a good practice. But it's important to, at the very minimum, take the principles at face value as they are and to start playing with them. And I think what's really cool about them starting with mentalism, just to kind of talk a little bit about these principles, is all the other principles, to me, even in the definition of them, it's a very obvious dichotomy.
Yes.
All is mind, universe is mental but mentalism itself kind of has this holistic approach to it. And then you get to cause and effect, or as above so below, or to the left and to the right. But mentalism kind of is this homogeneous kind of inviting you in with everything as one, and then starting to understand how these things start to differentiate themselves. So yeah, that's why mentalism is one of my favorite principles.
Yes, it was one of those things for me too. It was like, as a mystic or a right brain driven individual, when it comes to like how I approach things, I could see like, okay, I can imagine that everything is mind, but then I'm like, well, my left brain is like, but practicality, Jordan, how is that practical?
Yeah.
Like, is this true? Like, I could see it in humans. Is it true in animals? Is it true in plants? Is it true in mineral? Because the principle states all is mind. So then it's like, well, can I see this mind in a particle? And then someone would say, well, I don't think particles have mind. Because I think that to have mind, you have to have a certain degree of brain development. And it's like, well, change your definition and, watch the second episode where we talk about mentalism and we break it down and we say, well, it's mind, and we're not just referring to a brain. That's a more human-centric viewpoint of mind. And they didn't have that approach when they were thinking about it. They were thinking about universal intelligence, and everything has intelligence, whether it's consciously intelligent or not, is something for you to discover on your own.
Yeah.
But the very fact that there is data there, and that it interacts, whether it's instinctive or it's driven by the wave and so on, there's a reason why, but it's not necessarily about the reason at first. It's about seeing it and saying, oh, well, I can see that particles do interact and there is an intelligence there. Okay, well, there's your all is mind, the universe is mental concept.
Yeah, challenge yourself to see it. If you don't see it, challenge yourself to look at it from a different perspective, to get to a point to where you do see it. And that's a very important trait to have, and I agree. This is one of those things that you're going to have internal struggles with logic versus reason versus your own personal experiences versus things you've read. And as you get through it, you'll slowly, start to trust more and more, I believe, in these principles, and they will start to become the bedrock, hopefully, or the foundation of your further, more distant conversations. And you'll see that with me and Jordan. So kind of in closing thoughts, this was a very amazing, surreal situation to be in, to be able to go over these principles with my buddy, my brother, and talk about it to you guys at home, and to be able to bring this information to the masses, to social media, to a place where there is so much misinformation, and to be able to get that out there is just, it's a dream come true. It's not that we're done, but this season is over. This was kind of the introduction, and now we're really gonna start moving. So I just really appreciate everybody at home and everybody that's interacting and making this dream a reality. We appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And I think that everybody should apply the principles to that like and share
Dang it.
and comment button.
I gave you an opening. I had it, and I kind of needed water. I stepped back, and you came in, and you got it.
Yeah, listen, I was waiting. I was like, I hope he forgets. I really do. Because I told him I was going to get him because he stole my shine last time.
Yeah. As you could tell, we enjoy letting you guys know how using a polarity to hit the like button. It doesn't cost you anything.
Yep.
And if anything, it's going to recommend more videos like this. If there's other people out there doing things like this, it'll recommend it. So, yeah, give that like button a push.
Right there.
We greatly appreciate
Somewhere
it.
down here.
Yeah, somewhere
Hit
in
it.
the ethers.
He's getting this Western yogi on.
Yeah, it's all going to come out at some point. All right, we love you. Peace.
Yeah, don't talk to me, it's off to me. Assault police, the archer squeeze. My carpentry is carpeting for all of these. False MCs, a chocolate scene. I'm Charlie Sheen. I darken dreams, the carpet bleeds. My pauper leaves a scar in your whole face like a Carter scene. I go hard cause the car to me. You ain't hard as